In this section, we are going to work on the topic of the self. We are going to develop a therapy so that you can reinforce that state of your being. And based on that, the first thing we must define is why it is so important that you undergo a therapy of this type and why you should reinforce that state. The main reason for working on this topic is that most people don't know who they are, and therefore, many of the emotional problems they face throughout their lives are derived precisely from the fact that not knowing who they are, this leads them to distrust themselves. That it is very possible what has happened to you throughout your life. That distrust and insecurity and lack of character arises precisely from the fact that you have not developed your ego state. And that causes two effects. First, you become too permeable to the manipulations or decisions of the people around you. If you don't trust yourself, because you don't know who you are, it will be very difficult for you to question others, even when they want to hurt you. That would be the external effect. The internal effect would be that by not having a developed ego state, your own ego state lives trapped in the ego states of other people. Look, you don't live in yourself, but you live in the ego state, whether it's your mother or your father or some people who have unconsciously taken over that part of your psyche. If you pay attention with this, we can establish a very important conclusion. That many of the emotional problems you face do not exist because of you, but because you are replicating the emotional illnesses of other people. That's why in my practice, I usually tell my clients that when parents are neurotic, their children tend to be neurotic. Not because the children have a problem, but because they are replicating the way their parents react. Therefore, as you can see, with a therapy of this type, what you will achieve is regain your freedom. Nothing more and nothing less. You will be able to develop that ego state of yours, which will allow you to make your own decisions without fear and without guilt, and that others who exist in your reality or in your mind will not be the ones who control your destiny. Now, when we talk about your being, who you are, we must make the distinction between three components of your individuality. On the one hand, we have your spirit, which in a very succinct way is the relationship that you establish with the divine world, that of the gods or that of God, depending on your beliefs. And on the other hand, we have your soul, where it is located your true essence. And finally, we will meet your ego state. Spirit and soul, they are not yourself. They are different things. If I tell you this, it is because I want you to be very aware of where we are going to be operating in this module. The spirit and the soul, which also have very important effects on you, and which are topics that go a long way, I am going to leave them for another section. Here we are only going to focus on your self-state. Therefore, in this therapy, we are going to focus on knowing how your ego or self operates, what are the forces that act on it, how you can balance yourself, and eventually that you yourself are the one who drives your ego state and not those forces or people that until now have been operating on you. Once we do this, we will move on to the process of reinforcing your ego state, where you will discover what forces and experiences have limited your ego, which in turn will allow you to heal yourself and develop those aspects of yourself that have been blurred, whether due to bad experiences or the interaction you have had with others, that throughout your life have had an influence that is too pernicious for your existence. Here, you will discover the moments in which your ego state was altered, in which you stopped being who you are, being who you were, in which you abandoned your own desires and began to feel guilty for who you really were. This whole process will be what will allow you to discover who you really are, which is going to be what is going to enable you to regain control over all these psychic forces that atrophy any glimmer of confidence and security that you can develop in yourself. Given this brief introduction of what we are going to be seeing in this module, let's move on to the first section where we are going to work on the topic of balancing your ego state. I see you there.